Hello, my name is Jessica Saccone. I am a library clerk with the Maston Public Library. Today I'm being joined by Mallory Bailey, who is a sexual assault counselor and youth advocate with the Victims Resource Center of the Finger Lakes, located in Newark, New York.
Yes.
I'm so glad you could join me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. So some people might not be aware of the fact that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So that's why we wanted to reach out and talk to someone in your department. And we're also going to get into a little bit, we're going to cover some general information, but we're also going to get into a book that both you and I have read that was recently released called My Dark Vanessa. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But I was able to snatch that one from the library before we closed. Unfortunately, we never did have it out for circulation yet, but we will once we're open again. All right, so Mallory, could you please explain a little bit about what the Victims Resource Center is and what services you offer?
Yeah, so the Victim Resource Center, or the VRC as we generally call it, we are a private nonprofit agency that provides services to victims of dating, domestic, family violence, sexual violence, stalking, bullying, and child abuse. And we have a plethora of services, so I'll just go over a few of them. We do have a 24/7 bilingual confidential toll-free hotline. We have a bilingual victim services program that actually covers 6 counties, and those are Wayne, Ontario, Yates, Seneca, Livingston, and Cayuga. We also have the only safe dwelling or shelter for 4 counties, and that covers Wayne, Ontario, Seneca, and Yates.
Wow.
Yeah, but we also accept any referrals from New York State and the surrounding counties. We do a lot of advocating in the areas of like personal or community, criminal justice, educational, medical, and anything within the legal realm. We have our case management program. We do short-term counseling, referrals to other agencies. We actually provide assistance in filing and writing the orders of protection in family court. We do custody petitions. We also have the SANE program, which is the sexual assault nurse exam. That happens at Newark Wayne Community Hospital. So we would accompany and advocate during the exams. And we also have an anti-trafficking program, and that provide education to law enforcement professionals, schools, and pretty much anyone that will allow any amount of time to listen to me.
Wow, so you guys really have a pretty comprehensive amount of services that you offer.
Yeah, and there are only 10 of us.
Oh, wow. Well, and that's good that, like you said, to get the word out so that people are aware that these services exist.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people that are maybe in a situation where they're experiencing abuse, they feel very isolated. And might feel like there isn't much help out there, or they might not realize, they might think that the help they need isn't available.
Right.
So it is good for people to know that there's such a wealth of help available. And like you said, really, it sounds like if people need help, you're there to help them.
Yeah, and all of our services are free and voluntary. So, you know, we don't insurance or anybody for anything, which is good for people to know, because, you know, sometimes people, they don't, you know, get services because they think there's going to be some sort of copay, or there's going to be a record for it on their insurance or something like that. And nope, just free voluntary service.
Oh, good. Fantastic. And what is that crisis number? Just so I'm sure we'll mention it a few times, but.
Yep, it is 1-800-456-1172.
And you said that's a 24-hour hotline? Okay.
Yep.
And anyone can call that?
Yeah, anyone can call it, even if you're not the victim, but maybe it's a family or a friend, or you just have questions. It is answered by somebody who works here, so somebody who is trained to respond.
Oh, fantastic. And during this current unprecedented time of the COVID-19 pause, which has just recently been extended to May 15th, what unique challenges is your organization facing now?
The biggest one is not being able to provide services face-to-face, in person. Obviously, if there is a situation where that's necessary, we will do that. But generally, everyone's staying home. So that's been our biggest challenge, and the hardest part, not only for us as advocates, but also for clients.
Yeah.
When you take the face-to-face contact away, you don't get to visibly see somebody's emotions or their expressions and the body language when you're just on the phone. And those things are really important, because we get a bigger picture of what that person is experiencing when we see all of those things combined. But we're making accommodations and learning how to adjust, and still providing a majority of our services. So been a lot of change, but we're still doing it.
And I mean, I guess that leads me into the next question I had, which was, and I know this is a bit of speculation, but how do you think this period of isolation is going to affect those who have either survived some manner of trauma or are experiencing trauma, going through some kind of abuse right now?
I think the biggest effect that it is having, and that it probably will have, is that mental and emotional due to the isolation, especially with people being out of work. So that could normally be our clients, our survivors, their safest time. That means that their perpetrator is out at work for an extended period of time, during the day, or they're out and working. It gets them out of that really intense environment. So the isolation is keeping people that are in unhealthy relationships together without those breaks. Under the best of circumstances, isolation is difficult. More difficult when you're surviving that trauma or abuse day in and day out. It's mentally and physically exhausting for our clients to be hyper alert, which is probably the biggest impact that we're seeing and will see.
And I know in just research I've done that hyper awareness is a big factor, and it is absolutely exhausting.
Yes.
So what is it that you would like people to know during this time? Like what are you guys doing at the VRC to adjust to this period? Like you said, I know you said you're doing, adjusting to things not being face to face, but like for those people that are in those situations, what is it you would like them to know?
We certainly want people to know that they're not alone. We recognize that violence and sexual abuse don't stop during a crisis like this one. We want people to know that our advocates are available to support you and help develop safety plans for everyone's unique situations. Again, our 24/7 hotline is fully operational and will continue to be operational. Our safe dwelling remains open and available during this. Our counseling, case management will continue. We are actually still able to petition for orders of protection. So that remains the same. The biggest thing is just letting people know that we're still here, we're still open, and we're still available.
Oh, fantastic. And that hotline, I think you might have said this earlier, but you did say that is confidential. So like if people maybe aren't ready yet to fully put themselves out there, but they do maybe have some questions, that is confidential, so they don't have to feel like.
Correct. Yeah, they don't have to even give us their name if they don't want to. Yep. We want to respect that.
Okay. And kind of moving specifically to the topic of sexual assault, since April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I mean, it's a massively complex issue, but can you, to the best of your ability, kind of give a definition for that, as to what like kind of constitutes sexual assault? And I'm sure there's crossover to other things as well, but.
Yeah, so sexual violence in generally defined is subjecting another person to sexual contact without consent. That includes any touching of the sexual or other intimate parts. There are certainly different kinds of sexual violence. So in that case, I always recommend, calling our hotline or speaking to someone confident about any specific questions or experiences that they are going through or have had in the past. That's generally what it is.
Okay. And kind of just in the public eye, we often hear about sexual assault in terms of social situations. You hear about like date rape or acquaintance rape, or people, being out somewhere and having some sort of, incident happen to them. With this focus now on social distancing and people staying home, are you seeing a change in the type of maybe calls or the type of issues people are reaching out for? Or is it really just maybe a misconception in the public eye that this is largely a social issue?
Yeah, so this is a tough question to answer, because what the general public thinks of when they hear about sexual assault and what we as professionals and providers know when we hear about sexual assault are sometimes two very different things. I think the general public would believe that the number has gone down, and due to the fact that everyone has to stay home, and because the public usually thinks of sexual assault in terms of that social situations, the date rape or acquaintance rape. However, as professionals and as someone whose focus is on sexual assault, I can tell you that's not true. The most common form of rape or sexual assault is within an intimate relationship. So what we're seeing is that the occurrence for people who are being sexually assaulted within their relationship is actually increasing during this
time. Okay. Yeah. And that is good information to know and to get out there, because like you said, I think there is there's a public perception, and then there's the perception of the people who work with it and see it every day. And I believe that, probably most people are thinking, oh, incidents must be going down, whereas actually what with people being out of work or being home, being in those situations where they are so much closer with their perpetrator, that it's actually rising.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And along with, and certainly not to minimize this at all, but along with the physical ramifications of sexual assault, what are some other types of trauma that these survivors go through?
So aside from just the physical, a lot of it is psychological. So for example, things like nightmares, dissociation, flashbacks, sleep disturbances, things like that. Also the mental and emotional ramifications, that constant reliving of the assault, or depression, shame, the feeling of guilt, or even denying, PTSD. So aside from the physical impact, a victim of any type of sexual violence experiences lifetime or ramifications. It almost becomes like a marker in your timeline. So people who are survivors describe their lives in like two separate areas. So before the assault and then after the assault. So nothing is ever the same. Does that mean you're guaranteed a lifetime of suffering? Absolutely not. But it certainly changes you.
Yeah. And with such a vast array of trauma, because I also, just to clarify, in case we were talking about the kind of the public perception versus the reality of it. If I think sometimes there is a public perception of the physical assault and the ramifications for that, and to a certain extent the mental, ramifications that spiral out. But at the VRC, how do you guys deal with this sort of comprehensive array of trauma that a person goes through?
So it's gonna
continues to go through.
Yeah, it's gonna sound kind of cliche, but the number one thing is just to meet victims where they're at. We are available when they want. We don't force any kind of decisions or services. We truly listen without judgment and understand that every person we work with is unique and they have experienced a unique trauma. So they need to be provided services in a very unique way. They kind of have to be tailored to each individual. And that individual has to be the driving force. We're there to listen and to give information and provide services and support and resources, but we have to do so in a way that empowers that person and kind of gives back that power and control in their own lives to make the best decisions for themselves. The biggest thing I always say is that the client is the expert on their own lives. We will never know better than they do, and we should keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I can imagine that there's, like you said, it has to be very tailored to the individual, because not only is their situation going to be unique, but also I'm sure where they are, what they are maybe ready for, or what they need has to be handled with a definitely individual style.
And we have to understand that it has nothing to do with us. So what maybe I think is best for them, or what maybe somebody else thinks is best for them, we don't fully know, because we will never fully understand what they've experienced, how they grew up, all those cultural norms that have kind of, they play a part into how everyone experiences their individual traumas. So yeah, we just have to be very realistic about, our abilities and allowing that person to do what they need to do for themselves.
Yeah. And I know prior to this, interview, I'd written out some questions, mostly because I was nervous, but I actually just thought of this one now. What kind of training do you guys receive for this, for working at the VRC?
So we do go through, when you first start here, there are 40 hours of domestic violence training. We're also rape crisis certified. And we have, oh my goodness, I don't even know how many hours every single year that you have that continuing education.
Yeah.
A bunch of us come with different backgrounds and different degrees. But I think that's a positive thing. We work really, really well together, but yeah, there's ongoing training.
I can only imagine. Now, before we kind of shift a little bit to this recent publication, which deals with all those sexual assault as well as the mental and emotional side of it, is there anything else you'd like to share about the VRC, or anything I missed in my questions?
I don't think so. I think you did really well with it.
Well, thank you. But yeah, because I just really want to give people a comprehensive picture of what is available to them right now, because this is just such a tough time, such an unprecedented time.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say, yeah, you couldn't be more accurate, especially during this time. One of the things that the that the governor has requested are the numbers for our hotline.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had to look at like last year's numbers as opposed to like this year's.
Yeah.
These days. And what we're seeing is about twice as many hotline calls.
Wow.
A day. So we're definitely seeing an increase in the need for services during this time.
Wow.
So as much as people can know about us, the better.
Yeah. And I mean, this is another question I just kind of randomly thought off the top of my head, and it's just really my own curiosity. Do you think that with people being, I'm going to hopefully not stumble over my words, which is why I write things out ahead of time. But with this situation where some people are being forced into very close confines, with, you know, potentially with their perpetrators of abuse, do you think this time is having more people maybe recognize, if they didn't recognize what they were going through as problematic, or maybe they only had an inkling, is this maybe the unfortunate catalyst that's having at least some people kind of cross over into seeing this as a problematic situation for them? I know it's a bit of a weird question.
Yes and no. I think as far as our clients go, I think they recognize that it was unhealthy. I think what it's done has pushed more change. So more calls about people, you know, being ready. You know, this is their moment. This is their time.
Okay.
That they've had. Act and, you know, want something different. So
maybe if people were thinking about it before, but they got those breaks.
Yes.
In between of, say, the person maybe going to work, or, you know, and now they don't have those breaks, so it's kind of putting pressure on those situations where people are coming forward to say that no, this has to change.
Yes.
So okay, well, you and I actually both read this recent publication called My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a fictional book. So it is not, I have read, you know, some memoirs and some non-fictional accounts, but this one is a fictionalized story. And for anyone who out there might not be familiar with it, well, first of all, this book was published actually a month ago today. So it was published, I believe I saw that it was March 20th. But it is the fictionalized account of a woman named Vanessa. In the beginning of the story, she is 32 years old. It takes place in 2017. Kind of, I don't believe the Me Too movement is mentioned by name, but kind of at the height of when the Me Too movement began. And a high school English teacher of hers is being accused of sexual assault against several of his students. And then the book jumps back to 2002 when Vanessa is 15. She starts going to a boarding school and meets this Jacob Strain, this 42-year-old English teacher. And from there, you get this back and forth between present time and past time of, you get the details of how she ended up in this relationship with this 42-year-old man. And it's all first person perspective. So it is all being told from her perspective, from her mind. What I found most effective, I think, about the book is also what's causing some controversy, which is that, you know, from Vanessa's perspective, she is a character that doesn't actually see this relationship as abusive. She sees it as romantic. She sees it as special, as intense, as, you know, as that she was just, as she's told by this man, that she's just irresistible, that he couldn't resist her. It's not that he's a pedophile. It's not that he's attracted to young girls. It's that she was special and he couldn't resist her. And so even in present day, her 32-year-old self has a hard time believing these accusations because she wants to believe that she was the only one, that there was something unique about this situation. And as the book goes on, she has to come to terms with what happened to her, the effect it's had on her life. And coming to terms with the sort of the truth about what happened. So in your opinion, what with reading this book, did you feel that the author did a good job kind of getting her point across about the trauma of these types of abusive relationships between, like, you know, young impressionable people and older authority figures?
Absolutely. I instantly thought of another book that is a memoir that I love and recommend to anyone, especially professionals or anyone who has any type of interactions with victims of sexual abuse. And that memoir was Tyger Tyger. I think I mentioned to you by
I looked it up, yeah.
Margot Fragoso.
Mm-hmm.
That book also had a ton of controversial reviews and thoughts. The reason I believe they both had those reactions is because, as outsiders reading it, it brings about an extreme level of discomfort. And I think when a topic kind of has that extreme discomfort, maybe it's because it's something we should be talking about. You know, for the longest time, sexual abuse has been very hush-hush. You don't talk about it. Now we have authors and survivors who are extremely courageous and brave and are bringing to light very real feelings that our survivors are experiencing. I think for some people, it's easy to see that's abuse and to be able to name it because they're not, quote unquote, in it. And they don't have those emotions attached to it. But for survivors, it's not that easy, especially with this kind of sexual abuse. I think the book does an incredible job at recognizing and very accurately showing the depth of this kind of abuse. It's not only accurate, but it's also very normal for a survivor of sexual abuse to have positive memories and feelings towards their perpetrator. I've heard countless survivors of child sexual abuse say that sometimes the person they hate the most is also the person that they love the most in these situations, because they bonded throughout the abuse. That's why a perpetrator can continue that abuse for the duration that it happens. We actually call that trauma bonding. And what that is that perpetrator forms a relationship prior to that abuse in order for it to even happen. It's a crime of opportunity. We as outsiders might feel uncomfortable with this. However, we really need to recognize that it's not our life, it's not our experience, and we don't get to label or tell someone how to feel. You know, logically, we may know that yes, it's abuse, but we still don't get to tell someone how to react or how to deal with it. You know, our job is to validate whatever someone is feeling, and that is what kind of opens up the gates to healing and to providing a place for victims to feel comfortable disclosing their traumas. If we don't do that, if we react by saying things like, well, you shouldn't feel like that, or that's wrong, which I think a lot of people hear, and maybe even, you know, from family or friends with the best of intentions. However, that's actually exhibiting very controlling and manipulative behaviors, you know, just like the abuser does. Once again, it takes all that power and control away from the person that's the victim. You know, what we need to do is have empathy for people and allow them to process what has happened to them on their own terms, in their own time, and let them know that even those conflicting feelings are okay. You know, so even though they know it was wrong to say like, oh, I still have love for that person. It's okay. It's okay. And just to recognize that because somebody may deal with their experiences differently doesn't make your process wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of our survivors kind of fight themselves on their feelings instead of just allowing it to be okay. You know?
Yeah. And
yes, I thought, I'm sorry. I thought the book, it was incredibly accurate, and which is why I love it so much. I think a lot of people look at me like I'm a crazy person when I say that I recommend those books. I love, and it's not for, you know, that somebody had to experience a trauma for them to be written. It's not that. It shows the very real side and the very real emotions and feelings that we see our victims facing and struggling with.
Yeah. And I agree with you in that, you know, I was telling my coworkers, because I was the one that actually recommended this, that we even ordered this book. And I was telling, you know, my coworkers about it, and I was explaining it, you know, kind of this rhapsodic language. Oh my goodness, it's fantastic. And then, you know, but then I was also like, I'm not to say it's an easy book to read.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it is difficult at times. But I think it is important for people to see, I mean, narratives and stories are so important to our lives anyway, to see other viewpoints and other walks of life. But I think it also helps people to, you know, understand that if you know someone, or if it's not feelings you yourself have experienced, if it's not something you can connect with on that kind of level, if you know someone, or you have anyone in your life, you know, it can and maybe help you to understand, to have that empathy if you know, they begin to share certain things with you, or if they come to you and want to, you know, share something, you know, to help you understand that these feelings are very complex and that it's okay. And for the VRC, if there was somebody who wasn't experiencing abuse directly, but maybe someone in their life was, and they had questions about it, would they call that same crisis hotline, or would they call a different number, or so that same? Okay. And just because it bears repeating, that's 1-800-456-1172.
Correct.
Okay. So if they just have questions, if it's not them specifically, but they have questions about, you know, someone else in their lives, they can call.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with our like sexual violence, those types of crimes, you know, you may not be the primary victim, but say, you know, the primary victim is your child. You know, consider that adult, that guardian, whoever you are, to be a secondary victim, because you know, that's trauma to you as well. And times it's providing services to our secondary victims, because it's very valid, it's very real, and sometimes the best way of helping out our loved ones is also by helping out ourselves.
Yeah. And I read in it was an article I read about this book in the Atlantic, that the author of that particular article brought something, the way, and this isn't like a term that they coined, so I wouldn't put too much meaning behind it for anyone watching out there, but they, you know, it brought up the fact that a lot of people were kind of uncomfortable with this book, and part of the reason seemed to be because this protagonist, Vanessa, did not embody what most people outside of these situations kind of see as like the perfect victim. Meaning not that the person's perfect for being victimized, but rather that they don't recognize it immediately as wrong or abusive. They don't have, you know, this sort of immediate reaction, even if they stay quiet of it. You know, in this, of course, the character's 15 when this begins, and I think the author does a great job portraying that confusion and that that sort of cognitive dissonance between knowing in there somewhere that your teacher should not be attracted to you, but also she's been led to believe at this point that she's mature, she's special, she's, that they're almost like soulmates. There was a question in here somewhere. But I guess we've kind of touched on this already, but sorry, I'm just reading my notes. So
okay.
for people that may still be questioning what they've experienced, that may be, like you said, especially in an intimate relationship where they love this person, but they're maybe having questions, or there may be things that they're uncomfortable with. What would you like people like that to know about these experiences?
That they are completely normal. They are completely normal. My entire time with working with victims of sexual abuse, I have not met anyone who has ever fit into the mold of the perfect victim. They do not exist.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to the fact that we're all unique individuals with unique experiences. Not a single one is the same. So it's really providing that place for a victim to come to and know that what they're experiencing is normal. No matter what anyone else says or thinks or feels, it is normal. You just have to give them that space.
It's sort of like there is no normal for this, therefore it's all normal.
Yes. And I know they touched on, not really being upset, but kind of, with the fact that a victim could defend their abuser. And, that happens for a variety of reasons. We've seen some victims defend their abusers because they genuinely did not know that it was wrong. For others, maybe it's because that's how they can mentally protect themselves at that point in time, because they're ready to process what has happened to them. When people get upset or however they feel when a survivor defends their abuser, they don't know what they're doing is they're actually victim blaming. We have to think about where does that responsibility lie? Who is the abuser? Who made the choice to victimize another individual, and let the victim respond however they do. I always go back to, and I'm not really sure why, the Larry Nassar case. His first victim for the longest time defended him. And he ended up getting to the point where she was able to speak at his hearing and his sentencing. But people were upset for a long time because she defended him for a long time. And they just couldn't understand, why would somebody do that? But there's so much manipulation that goes into long-term sexual abuse, that however that person deals with it, there's reason, and it's normal and it's okay.
And actually, could you maybe also go into that too about a term we hear a lot is called grooming. In this from the framework of this book, you have a young 15-year-old girl being led into this relationship slowly by this grown 42-year-old man. And I think they might even say it at one point. I think he says it actually, which I found, I really liked the way that the author did this because of the mental and emotional manipulation. Because I think even he uses that as like people are saying, I groomed you for this. And that's, he's using it as a defense, like that's insane, that's ridiculous. So, but even though that's exactly what he did. So, but yeah, can you go into what that term means? Because people may have heard that, like what that kind of stands for.
Yeah. So for me personally, and I know there is a shift in for professionals who provide services, we don't really use that term anymore. But a lot of people do, and they have heard it. But the reason for that is because in our everyday lives, we groom ourselves. So it's seen as actually like something positive. You know, we groom ourselves by brushing our hair, brushing our teeth, getting our nails done. We even get our pets groomed and things like that. So it can be very confusing for people when we use that term, especially kids. So I generally call it what it is, and that's manipulation.
Okay.
And when a perpetrator manipulates someone, especially in these situations, like in the book, what they're doing is forming a relationship and gaining that trust and respect and that opportunity in order to take advantage of someone. You know, what they're doing during that process is actually finding out what someone's needs are. And that could be, you know, attention, love, affection. It could be even like concrete things like money or housing or food. So that's what that abuser is doing. They're finding out what that person needs, and then they are meeting those needs. So that's why this kind of abuse has such a long lasting effect on our survivors, because they're trying to fight those feelings, you know, instead of allowing themselves to feel whatever it is. But manipulation is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, that bonding leads to this trauma bond.
Yes.
Is there, and now I know that there's never going to be like, okay, and then the switch flips here, but like, is there a place where that kind of like, more so people can kind of distinguish between healthy and unhealthy relationships, that sort of paying attention to people and being interested in their needs and meeting their needs? When does that go from being a healthy, normal relationship of two people into that traumatic, and it becomes that trauma bond as opposed to just like a regular, you know, bonded relationship?
So it would be like, why is that person doing the things they're doing? Like, is it because they genuinely love that person, or is it to exert that power and control? If someone's doing something to gain that power and control over somebody, that is when it turns unhealthy and into abuse.
Okay. All right. And why do we, or rather, how might this mental and emotional abuse encourage survivors to stay silent or to even defend their abusers? Like, what is it about that, you know, sort of makes it so confusing for people and makes it so that they themselves might not recognize it as an abusive situation?
Yeah, the mental and emotional abuse, it kind of programs us and manipulates us into thinking a certain way. Especially if you have that bond with someone. You know, this is somebody that is saying that they love you and that they will do anything for you. And so we take what those people tell us to heart. You know, it has a greater impact than, say, if somebody were walking the street and saying something to me if I didn't care about, you know. So that's why it's so impactful. You know, maybe they're thinking that they're responsible for what's happened to them, because you know, abusers will say like, well, if you didn't do this, or this is your fault, and you truly do that. Or maybe it's been happening for so long that you don't know what's wrong. That's your norm. Obviously our society and our cultural norms don't necessarily help with this. You know, it encourages people to stay silent. We are seeing a shift, which I'm very happy about. But, you know, until we as a society get comfortable with being extremely uncomfortable and are able to talk about hard things, survivors won't be able to disclose what's happening, you know. Provide those safe places where people are believed first and foremost. Because, you know, like I said, that mental and emotional abuse is so powerful. I would say a majority of our clients here at the VRC have said that it's not the physical part of an abusive relationship, or, you know, any type of abuse that hurts the most. It's the mental and emotional abuse that they endure, because, you know, they say it lasts far longer. You know, they can deal with the physical aspect of it. It's what's going on in your head that is just so extremely tough, because it takes a long time.
So like, as you're saying, it's so multifaceted. You can have the perpetrator blaming you, or putting that responsibility on you. And then you have your internal, you know, self-talk of what's going on. And especially if you have been bonded to this person, which is telling you trust this person, that you should be able to trust their perception of you. And if their perception is saying one thing that's, you know, different than reality, you are inclined to believe it, even if it doesn't match. And then also we have the societal aspect of it, that I imagine people have very conflicted feelings about that, when they want to talk to somebody about the fact that, like, you know, they maybe have intense caring feeling towards a person, and also these conflicted feelings of what's happened to them. So I think you're absolutely correct that as a society, we need to get better at being able to listen to uncomfortable conversations and being able to say that's okay. You know, and not just reacting out of a place of wanting to be like, well, that's wrong and you should see it as wrong. And, you know, we kind of want these black and white things. This is right, this is wrong. And
it is so far.
It don't work that way.
Yeah.
So it is great to know that people do have a place that they can contact, that they can have those conversations, especially for, I think, a lot of people too, like you said, the financial aspect of it. You know, I personally think that therapy is a wonderful thing. Of course, I like to talk. For me, talking things out is always very helpful. But sometimes that can be so there can be such a financial block. Or
and scheduling too.
Scheduling
is really difficult. We hear a lot of that now too. It's hard.
And so it is good to know that there is a resource. There are resources out there that people can contact. I'm just reading my next question because I think we might have covered it. But yeah, so basically, like, and I think you've already said this, is that, you know, because I think my next question was like, what would you like people to know? Just that it's normal, that it's okay, that these are all normal feelings, and that it is okay to talk about. It's okay to you know, contact certainly the VRC and talk about. And I guess this is also a question I'm kind of throwing out of left field. If people are maybe looking for resources on this subject, but aren't maybe ready to reach out and speak to somebody yet, like you mentioned, the book Tyger Tyger, certainly, you know, My Dark Vanessa can maybe start giving some language to what some people are feeling. Can you, and I'm kind of throwing this at you out of nowhere, can you think of any other resources, just because we live in this world of so much information? Is there anything you can think of that you might suggest people check out, or that if they're questioning, like maybe some reading or videos or books or anything?
Yeah, they can always check out our, we do have a website, vrcfl.org, and that does have resources and, just things to answer some questions. If you're not ready to contact, via phone, hotline, or the office or anything like that, there is an area where you can, email one of us. It has all of our email addresses on there, so mine is there as well. Sometimes that's even easier for people, is like the email, the texting. It's not using, I guess.
Yeah.
But
well,
I
also,
would certainly.
If maybe someone's in a situation right now where they can't be talking on the phone, they can't be verbalizing what's going on because it might not be safe to do so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. They can always contact us. Good.
That's good to know. There's a multitude of ways. So I guess, is there any other information you'd like to share with people during this time, or anything you'd like to say to kind of wrap this up and kind of finish it up?
My biggest things are, just to believe and validate. If somebody were to disclose that anything is happening to them or has happened to them, that has the biggest impact for survivors. Sometimes that means more than even, going through the justice system and all that. Sometimes all they want is somebody to just say, I believe you. I believe you. Yeah. And to just listen to them.
Yeah.
So that's what I want people to be able to do, and just to understand that everyone is different, and, however they react is normal. It's very normal.
Good. That is good to know. And also, so just for one more time, we'll do the website is the vrcfl.org.
Yep.
Okay. And the crisis hotline is 1-800-456-1172. And that is a confidential hotline. Anyone can call it, whether they themselves are experiencing something, or whether they know someone who's experiencing something, or if they just have some questions that they want to explore. Well, that is fantastic to know. So Mallory, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And if anyone is interested, the book that we were talking of today is called My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Eventually, when Macedon Public Library is open again, this book will be available for circulation. Unfortunately, I can't tell people when that'll be, but I will have brought it back by then, because librarian privileges, I guess, that it came in right as we were about to close, so I got to take it home. But I'm glad I did, because I'm glad we got to have this conversation.
Thank you.
So yeah, I just want to thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to stop the recording for anybody watching, and you can just hang out for a minute, and we'll just get this taken care of. So again, thank you. And to anyone out there watching, thank you for joining us today.